This is G-Lynx, a Tier 6 premium helicopter on the British helicopter line in War Thunder, and when it comes to helicopter history in real life, this is actually a fairly important part. You see, G-Lynx started out as a Lynx AH Mark I demonstrator airframe used by the Westland Helicopter Company, but in 1986 something happened that really does set this airframe apart from any other Lynx. It set the official speed record for helicopters with a speed of 249 miles an hour or 400 kilometers per hour, a record that still stands as of 2019, which is actually a fairly impressive feat. Now, the record did of course require some special modifications, and the version in War Thunder does not exactly represent G-Lynx in that configuration, but rather a later weapons demonstrator configuration which still does feature some performance enhancing modifications, but it cannot reach the speed that was set in 1986. Now, it is still considerably faster than a standard Lynx AH Mark I, which does make this the best performing British helicopter currently in War Thunder. In-game, this is of course purchasable via the Gaijin store in a bundle pack costing €49.99, where you will get G-Lynx alongside 15 days of premium account and 2,000 Golden Eagles. Something worth noting when it comes to a gameplay perspective is that this helicopter gets both night and thermal vision and also a radar warning receiver system. Now, the night and thermal vision can be equally useful in both helicopter battles and ground battles, making enemy vehicles blatantly obvious and very easy to see at longer ranges, as of course any hot object, especially the engines on those vehicles, will glow fairly brightly and will be very easy to see. Now, the radar warning receiver system, not so useful in heli games as there's nothing that uses a radar to lock onto you, but in ground games where you have anti-aircraft vehicles locking onto you so that they can shoot you or fire missiles at you, that can be very useful and will really help you to avoid those enemy vehicles. G-Lynx, as with all helicopters, can of course be used in either helicopter battles, also known as helicopter enduring confrontation, and then also in ground battles. We will be looking at both of them in this video, but we're going to start off with helicopter battles. Now, before we get into some gameplay, it is worth quickly looking over some of the weapons that you will be using a bit more commonly in this game mode, starting off with the Stinger air-to-air missile. This is an infrared homing missile with an overload of 18G and an all-aspect lock range of 2.8 miles, and then also with a rear aspect lock range of 4.35 miles. This will be your primary anti-helicopter weapon, of which you can carry 4 of, and proves to be a highly effective missile, as infrared countermeasure devices have minimal effect on the missile, so the only countermeasure against the Stinger are flares. And of course, that is something that the enemy pilot has to deploy manually, so if they don't notice the missile warning or you're close enough that they don't get the warning, it's more or less a confirmed kill. And then of course there are many helicopters flying in this game mode that don't even have flares, so they are more or less confirmed kills. Of course, this does not mean that the missile is 100% effective. It can of course be disturbed by things such as the sun, of which is a fairly big heat source, or can occasionally just go a bit weird and not work, but for the most part they are a fairly effective weapon. I also take out the TOW-2 anti-tank guided missile. You can carry 8 of these, and in helicopter battles you can use this to take out either ground targets or enemy helicopters, which after some practice is relatively easy to do. The missile has 900mm of best effective penetration and a top speed of 329 meters per second with a range of 2.3 miles. And as said, it can be used against pretty much anything, be that ground targets or enemy helicopters. You do also have the option to use a CAD-B 20mm cannon with 570 rounds of ammunition and a rate of fire of 750 rounds per minute, although I tend to pass up this option as mounting the CAD-B actually removes 2 of your Stinger air-to-air missiles. So starting off in heli battles with the CAD-B 20mm cannon. This is not my preference, I do not take this gun. This was the only game where I took it, and really it was just so I could get some clips for this video. Usually I would take the 4 Stingers and the 8 TOWs. With this gun it's 8 TOWs, 2 Stingers, and then the gun. Really, I feel that personally I'm good enough with the TOWs and the Stingers that I don't really need to take this gun. The enemy helis don't tend to get close enough, to get into a gunfight. And then again, you have a rate of fire of 750 rounds per minute, which is considerably less than most rotary cannons you will come across on enemy helis, so in a gunfight you will probably be at a disadvantage anyway. So now moving on to my preferred payload, the 4 Stingers and the 8 TOW2 ATGMs, starting off by engaging a pair of Alouette 2s, of course using the Stingers, as they have no infrared countermeasures, no flares, so they are easy targets for those missiles. Once that's done, I then move on into the thermal site so that I can spot some enemy helis, and then use the TOW2s to take them out. First off, a H-34, fairly easy target. The H-34 and the Mi-4 that I'm going for next are fairly big, slow targets, and they're fairly easy baits for ATGMs. Really no point wasting an air-to-air missile on one of them. Next up, I initially look at a Hind, but then I see another Mi-4, go for him. He's a bit closer and, could take me out with his 50 cal if I didn't pay attention. And then, of course, an Mi-24A, not quite as deadly as the later versions, but could still be a bit of trouble if he got close. Now, something you want to be careful of is not becoming too reliant on the air-to-air missiles. For example, in this situation, see an enemy heli, fire a missile, it's an Mi-35, and he fires his flares just before it hits, and it misses. I then have to go to an ATGM, and I do take him out, but he was at fairly close range by the time I killed him, where he could have potentially taken me out with his gun. Same thing would have been the same for this Tiger. That's a helicopter with flares, so I don't bother firing an air-to-air missile. I just use the ATGM, which I know he does not have any countermeasures against. Same story here, Mi-35 again, firing off a bunch of flares. It will simply not work for me to fire an air-to-air missile, so I take him out with the ATGM. That tends to be the safe way to do it. I then, of course, fire an air-to-air missile at another heli, and, it's an AH-1G. He doesn't have any countermeasures, so that is basically free real estate for my missiles. Here we have a Lynx coming towards me in the cloud, fire off the ATGM, and actually the ATGM can be fairly foolproof. If you can get good with that missile, and you actually know how to lead the missile to hit the enemy targets, you will do quite well with that. So now moving over to ground battles, we're going to take a look at 2 other weapon types on G-Lynx that I have not already mentioned that do have a bit more of a place in ground battles than they do in helicopter battles. Firstly, the Hydra 70 M274 unguided rocket. You can carry 38 of these in 2 separate pods, although due to being unguided, you will need to get fairly close to a target to be somewhat accurate, and in doing that, you will most likely be shot down. You can also mount the AGM-114B Hellfire. This is a laser-guided missile with 1,100mm of best effective penetration and has a top speed of 475 meters per second. You can carry 8 of these, and they can be quite effective if they actually hit the target. If an enemy target stays still and you can keep your laser designator on the same spot, they will be quite accurate. However though, if the laser designator moves, the missile tends to just completely miss and do whatever it wants. And of course, naturally, tanks will most likely be moving. So most of your Hellfires may end up missing the target. Of course though, if you can find a camper who is sitting on a hill, not moving, and has no idea you're there, you can get off some pretty good shots, as we are about to see. So into a game on Poland, of course people on that ridgeline, they like to camp there, and they're not moving so much, which is a perfect thing for my Hellfires, and I take my first victim. Next up, what looks to be a German tank. He is sitting there. I don't kill him, but I do track him so he cannot move, which allows me to, of course, not move my designator, keep it on his tank. He can't really escape at this point. Next missile comes in, does some more damage. He is now on fire, and his engine is out. At this point, he's mine for the taking. One more missile, and he is dead. Another person on the hill, fire the missile off. He is hiding behind some rocks, so it's a little bit tricky, but I take out the commander and the fuel tank. He could still move, and he doesn't really move all that much, which is surprising. Next missile, I was aiming the designator slightly above, and it went behind him, but then I reposition that designator, and the next missile goes in and gets me that kill, giving me a triple kill there. And I do get shot at by, I believe, a tank. It hits me, and I'm not dead. So I originally decided to run away, but then I see an enemy heli, and of course, I have my stingers on board. I have 4 of them, so I get aimed up and, go for the closest target, get aimed up. It's a hind. Luckily for me, he decides not to fire his flares until the last minute, where, at that point, the missile hitting him is inevitable. Nothing he can do, and that is him dead. Moving on to the next game, though, I take a much more active anti-helicopter role, starting off by going for a Bo 105. Now, you see, in tank games, the Bo 105s, they're all going to be taking their max anti-tank guided missile loadout. In the CV2's case, that's 8 toes. The one downside of that is when you take all of those ATGMs, you cannot take any flares. So, in this game, I fired at that Bo 105. He had no opportunity to get away from that missile. Next up, an Mi-24. He will have had flares, but there's nothing he could have done. Of course, it was the premium one, and of course, all the mods are unlocked. So he would have had flares. He either just didn't get the warning, or just didn't get round to firing them. Next up, skipping forward a little bit, fire at another enemy target. This time, a little Alouette. Poor little Alouette, killing them all the time. Apologies to any Alouette pilots out there. Next up, we have another enemy heli, another hind. Fire the missile off, it's going in. You can again, with the thermal, see the heat signature, but he fires off some flares, and that is no kill for me. Take another look at the battlefield, because I was getting actually a ping on the radar warning system that there was a radar nearby. Could be a friendly, could be an enemy. Gave it a little look, didn't see any thermals on the ground, on the enemy side at least, so I then decided to head for that enemy heli. It's an Mi-35, fires a missile off. Luckily, I spam a bunch of flares, doesn't hit. He's coming back in pretty quick. I fire an ATGM, and again, he fires another missile. Spam dem flares, and I kill him. There we go. Mi-35M down. I did not die. Thankfully, my flares saved me there from 2 ILGA air-to-air missiles. Now moving on, though, we see another enemy heli. This time, another hind on the other side of the battlefield. So I fire an ATGM across the canyon. Luckily, he is just within the range of my ATGM. Hit him, he's dead. Pretty good stuff there. And that is that. And that was, of course, also the new German premium one, the HFS-80, a variant of the Mi-24P. And then after that, we have a few enemies remaining at the enemy spawn. At this point, the game had only been going a short time, but by this time, we had captured all the bases, and we were already camping them in their spawns. 5 air kills, 2 ground kills, a very nice game there in G-Lynx. So into our final game, we have a fairly equal amount of air-to-air and air-to-ground action in this one. First off, encountering a squad of 2 Eurocopter Tigers, the German regular and then a French premium. I fire an air-to-air missile, they deploy flares, it doesn't hit. ATGM, knock out the premium first, go for the German one. He tries to roll out at the last minute, but it doesn't stop me getting a solid hit and taking him off of the battlefield. Moving on now, Super Mystere. At this point, this aircraft just come out of a fight with another friendly fighter aircraft. He is low on energy, can't turn so quick. Easy bait for my missile. The missile goes right in there, knocks him out. Next up, we're going to get some ground kills. Of course, using the thermals to have basically easy vision onto the enemy. See them very easily. One of them down, TATB. Fire another ATGM, thinking that one of those enemies is still alive. Turns out it's 2 remains of 2 dead enemy tanks. Next up, yeah, we got a Tunguska. We got a deadly little SPAA. Getting a warning, apparently he's locking onto me, but he's not looking at me, and he's definitely preoccupied with someone else, allowing me to get in there, get 2 solid hits, one knocking out the driver, making him unable to move, and the second one being a solid hit to the turret. Final kill there on a ground target, third and final ground target kill, another TATB, driving away from the spawn. I was hiding behind the tree, using the thermal to see him, and there, just solid hit to the side, that's him dead, and that was the end of the game. First on the team, 3 air targets and 3 ground targets, certainly showing that G-Lynx can be very effective in both anti-aircraft and anti-ground. Well, there we go, G-Lynx in both helicopter and ground battles. Now, this is one of the premiums this update that I actually paid for myself, rather than just getting a Gaijin test drive for, and I do not regret that decision whatsoever. I have almost finished grinding the entire British heli line already, not that there's much to research, and actually I've generally had a lot of fun just playing the vehicle in both modes. The radar warning system is very useful for avoiding SPAA. Thermal sights are absolutely brilliant in both modes, allowing you to easily spot enemy targets, even if they're hiding behind trees, and even if they're at really long ranges. That can be incredibly useful, where you can see the enemy, and then you can plan how to take them out early because you know exactly where they are. Of course, if you're looking at grinding the British helicopter line and you're wondering if G-Lynx is worth the buy, then I would say yes. In both modes, it can be very effective, and in the right hands, you can get some very nice results, and can net a very nice income of RP and SL, thanks to its premium status. Anyway, that's it from me. If you did enjoy this review or found it useful, please consider dropping a like, and if you want to see more reviews like this, please consider subbing to the channel, which I would massively appreciate. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.